So um, Plato's from 2,500 years ago, and he might seem old-fashioned and he might seem crazy. Um, but I think we're still talking about this. I think this is still a radically important thing to be thinking about. Why? Because Plato, um, the whole idea that art is a bad copy of reality, that it distorts reality, that it distracts you from the things you should be caring about, like ethics and philosophy and God and truth with a capital T and beauty with a capital B and goodness with a capital G. We still have that with us. This is still a discussion that we have. If you've ever had anybody bother you because you play video games too much, um, video games, by the way, I never played long video games. I played short video games. Like I got a Nintendo Switch and I played that Goose Game, which was really fun, and I played this cool game called Donut County that was really fun. And I played some small games with some people. Mario Kart every once in a while, whatever. But because of COVID, I was trapped at home, and so I decided to. My best friend loves video games, and so I decided to. I was like, I want to do a proper video game that takes a long time to play. And you're going to make fun of me because to me this is an upper level game, but if you know it, you probably think it's like a middle level game. But I played this game called Hollow Knight. And boy, I got obsessed with it. I'm actually still obsessed with it. It's kind of an amazing game on the Nintendo Switch. I fucking love it. The point is that I played Hollow Knight, and one of the disturbing things about, and when I was a kid, they did this too, but one of the disturbing things about new video game systems is they keep track of exactly how many hours you played for. That is a scary statistic to look at. And granted, it took me longer to play Hollow Knight than other people because I had never really played a serious video game before, and so I think it took me a long time to learn. Like my reflexes weren't really good for the buttons, whereas my next game I think would go faster because I trained on Hollow Knight. But the point is that, and you have this little bug guy, and you go underground and you hit the other bugs with a sword, and you have to free the kingdom from whatever. So I played this game. Guys, this game took me 100 hours. 100 hours. 100 hours. A Shakespeare plays 4 hours. And I spent 100 hours on a video game. And and that's not even that long. Sometimes people play games for 200 hours, and they may have many. My best friend plays this game called, what the fuck is it called? Near Automata, I think. That's like a 220-hour game he spent on this thing. And that's one game he spent 200 hours on. You could do that more. Well, what would Plato say about that? Plato would not like that. Why? Because you are neglecting the real world, the world of the world of where you should be thinking about philosophy in order to live. You're essentially, video games are playable shadows. They're just like the movie theater looks a lot like the cave, and video games look even more like the cave because you just spend hours and hours in your apartment playing this video game, and it moves you away from. You become obsessed with a fake world, right? So the character in a game has to get enough money to buy a charm that I can use to power up my sword so that I can beat the boss. None of this is real. Like, this is not even real money. And there's a whole larger conversation about whether money in the real world is real, but we'll talk about that later. But the point is that I spent 100 hours in this game, and Plato would hate that because it's an illusion. Nothing in that game is real. It's just little ones and zeros making images on my screen, and these are not real people. They're like little machine guys. And that it distracts me from the world. And so if you ever heard anybody say that playing too many video games is making you neglect your life, that was one of Plato's big worries. Another of Plato's big worries is that art tries to make a copy of reality. But just like reality is a bad copy of a higher heavenly world, art is a bad copy of the world that we live in. And so the idea is that every level you go down, it gets worse and worse. If you ever used a Xerox machine, you can copy something on a Xerox machine, but then you can take the copy and copy that, and then you can take that copy and copy that, and then you can take that. If you do that enough times, it becomes hard to see because the copy gets worse and worse and worse and worse as you go. Because it's not an exact copy, it sort of deteriorates in between uses. So one of the things that Plato is concerned about is that art introduces things, like it teaches people wrong. Like you start thinking the world is like that, and it's not. So when we have a conversation, let's do a simple one. In the first Spider-Man movie, Peter Parker goes to school in Queens. Well, if you see the first Spider-Man movie, holy shit, the Queens High School has a lot of white people in it. It seems like, and I lived in Queens for many years, and it just doesn't seem right for a high school in Queens. But in the movie, I think the movie from like 2001 or whatever, right? In that movie, the high schoolers they're all white. And people were like, that's not realistic. So for the newer Spider-Man movies, they made it look more realistic, right? Because people said, this is not a realistic copy of reality. Queens doesn't really look like that. So when you have a high school in Queens in Spider-Man movie and it's filled with white people, it's like that's not what Queens is like. Have you ever been to Queens? Like that doesn't seem right for high school demographics. You have made a bad copy of reality. So the comments that people make about the Spider-Man movie are the same comments that Plato would make, which is that, and he already thinks reality is a bad copy of a higher heavenly world. So like, holy shit, is he going to be upset to discover that movies are a bad copy of reality? So anytime you hear somebody saying, oh, this movie's so stupid, that's not what really happened, this is misleading people about the truth, and because you see a movie based on a true story, sometimes you get out and you discover, like, none of that was real. So there was like a movie about the Stonewall riots, or a movie about Elton John's life, or a movie about, there's all kind of movies based on true stories. And then you find out, like, that's not right. They changed that, they changed that, they changed that, they changed that. But people don't know any better. And if the only thing you know about Malcolm X is from the Malcolm X movie, actually, that's a bad example. If the only thing you know about Nelson Mandela is from the Nelson Mandela movie, they cut a lot of things out. They made Nelson Mandela seem like a saint, but in real life, he beat his wife. They didn't put that in the movie. And then you end up walking around and you're like, oh, I know about Nelson Mandela. Do you? Do you? Or do you just know the bad copy? You've been misinformed. You're living in a cave. You're looking at shadows. You're looking at illusions. So Plato's whole concept is very massively influential. And again, it also really influences the early church, which is how you end up in a situation where people will tell you you are neglecting God by paying attention to earthly things. And again, a lot of that is money and sex, but a lot of that is beauty. A lot of it is too many paintings and too many novels and too many artworks, because it distorts your mind, people would believe. This is going to be hard to believe, but I'm sure people have told you that playing too many video games is bad for you. 150 years ago, they literally told people that reading too many novels was bad for them. That if you just read a stack of novels, it meant that you were, a little crazy. Because you're spending too much time with fiction. You're spending too much time looking at things that are not real. Where does that come from? It comes from Plato. So this is Plato's complaint about art, is that art is a bad copy of reality, and that's evil. Because it's a distraction, because it's pulling you away from the sort of higher heavenly things that you should be caring about. And this idea from 2,500 years ago is still floating around today. If we look at Hamlet, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on Hamlet right now, but if we look at Hamlet, you see this thing happening in Hamlet. Hamlet is supposed to the ghost comes to Hamlet and says, Hamlet, your uncle murdered me, your father. I'm your father, and your uncle murdered me, my brother. You got to get revenge. Well, what does Hamlet do? He's like, in the middle of the play, he like wastes all this time. He doesn't get revenge. He like waits and waits and waits and waits and waits. And then he's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make a play. Let's make a play. And then I'll test out whether I'm going to make a play showing the murder. And then I'm going to play it before my uncle, Claudius. And then that way I can see his reaction. But what's happened is that Hamlet has gotten distracted from his mission. What was he distracted by? Art. He was distracted by illusions. Notice he's so depressed in Hamlet, except when the actors come, he's so excited to see all the actors, because Hamlet loves plays. He loves actors. He loves art. He loves illusion. And it's interesting that Hamlet, he's supposed to be Hamlet's supposed to be a really simple play. It's supposed to be the story of a ghost tells him to get revenge, and he's supposed to get revenge and murder everybody, and then the play's over. And he just doesn't want to do it. He just gets distracted. And one of the key things that distracts him is art. He'd rather sit around. He literally writes lines for actors and helps the actors write their rehearsal, and he gets really into it, and he has a great time. And that's not what he's supposed to be doing. Art has distracted him. And then back in Shakespeare's day, Puritans, the sort of intense, severe religious group, Puritan Christians, didn't like the theater for the same reason, because they felt like people were going to see plays about fake people instead of learning about Jesus or whatever. So this is Plato's point, and it's still with us today, floating around. So that's the end of this video series for today, and I will see you guys next time. Probably going to talk about Plato a little more, and then I'm going to start the next thing. Thank you for bearing with me and watching these videos, and I love you all.